Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and we're going to get right into it here on how I use up all of these egg yolks from my previous macaron video. If you want to check that out, it's in the right hand corner. So firstly, we're going to start by getting rid of a lot of the egg yolks with this 12 egg yolk pound cake. Now I am referring to other recipes that are already on the internet, so I will link them down in the description box below, but I do make some really small minor changes which I will note in the video. Now, when you're working with egg yolk dense recipes, they very much rely on the whipping of the egg yolk itself. So it is important to really whip. The reason being is if we don't whip it, then we end up with a really dense cake. Now, one of the changes I do make here is I want to make this kind of a toffee-like version. So I'm just going to be adding in a little bit of that oil, and I did a full review on these oils if you want to check that out in the right-hand corner. And then I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the recipe as written. Now, although I usually skip steps like sifting the flour, especially for my own cake recipes because I've worked with them so much, I tried to follow the recipe directions to a T just so I could give you a really honest review of what I think of each of these recipes. And I'm folding in these ingredients just to make sure that I don't deflate this too much. I really want to maintain all of that air that was incorporated into those egg yolks in the first place. I was actually surprised at how thick this felt because honestly, when I poured those dry ingredients in, it felt like there was still so much egg. Now I'm buttering this bundt pan, and honestly, this bundt pan is super thick and it's very good quality. So make sure that you really butter it a lot or else you will never get that bundt cake out of there. This wasn't written in the recipe, but I'm going to add some toffee bits on top just to give it that nice toffee flavor as well. I put this in the oven for about 50 minutes, which is exactly how long the recipe said this would take. It probably could have been taken out maybe a minute or two earlier. Then I adorned it with some powdered sugar. Even after that dozen egg yolk recipe, I still had more egg yolks, and this one uses up 6 egg yolks. Now, I must say that this recipe went a little bit off of what was actually written down, so I will note the changes that I made in order to make this work. So we're just basically creaming the butters and sugars and egg yolks together. That's pretty standard for any cake recipe. Here is where I think it went a little bit wrong. I'm not sure what happened, but I did add the amount of milk that was written, but it just wasn't enough. Now, I also do add some espresso powder in here as well because I want to make this espresso flavored. And then we are going to sift our ingredients just like it says in the recipe. I want to give this a really good go, but as I was whipping here, I noticed, yep, this is just not enough liquid at all. Like, this is going to kind of turn out like a cookie. So instead, I did add a bunch more milk. I think I ended up adding about a half cup to a cup of milk. We'll get back to the way that baked up in a minute. So now I'm moving on to my Dulce de Leche buttercream. Now you can go ahead and check out this short in the right hand corner where it's basically using 2 ingredients, but I want to make this espresso flavored as well. So I'm adding in super strong coffee. There are a lot of teaspoons of espresso powder in that hot water. I add it in to the Dulce de Leche, which had just butter and the Dulce de Leche, and then I go ahead and I add icing sugar in as well. So I'm turning this into an American buttercream. The flavor is really perfectly infused with the slight bitter tones of that espresso, and it also has a nice fluffy and light sweetness coming from that Dulce de Leche. And I did also add pure vanilla extract this time around because I really wanted that nice vanilla flavor to come through too. This buttercream feels so silky smooth and it's easy to work with. All right, now let's get back to how these cakes actually baked up. They actually baked up pretty good, a little bit dry with the crumbs, so we're gonna be adding in some syrups and things here too. Now, I'm not really sure what went wrong with this recipe. Totally could have been my fault. I'm going to assume that something went wrong with the measurement of the flour because it was a little bit dry and it was really thick. So this is why I do like recipes that use grams or ounces, just because then it is very exact. But all good, it turned out fine, and it actually tastes really great. So what I'm using is I'm using that super strong coffee that I used in the Dulce de Leche, putting that in every layer, as well as putting a simple syrup in there. A lot of you guys ask me what it is that I'm pouring onto my cakes because I do this pretty much with every single cake unless I'm consuming it right away. And what a simple syrup is it's basically a 1-to-1 ratio of warm water and granulated sugar. So in this instance, I used 1 cup of warm water with 1 cup of granulated sugar. And then I just crumb coat as usual, and I did add some Skor bits in there as well. Now I'm doing the outer layer. Once that inner layer, the crumb coat, spent a sufficient enough time in the refrigerator, approximately 20 minutes or so. Now, because this frosting doesn't have a lot of icing sugar in it, it doesn't really form a crust too much. So you just want to get this nice and cold so you can coat it smoothly if you would like to, or you can add texture like I'm going to. I'm just going to take a buttercream comb here and I'm going to run it through. The trick to doing this is make sure that you don't dig in too deep or else you're not going to be able to get those nice lines and we're going to start to see parts of the cake in there. I'm using a French tip here to create these little swirls, and what I'm doing is I'm doing one on one side and then one on the opposite side. This is just to make sure that everything stays nice and even. If you're not used to piping things, this is actually really simple. All you need to do is squeeze, make sure that you have even pressure, and when you want to lift off, stop squeezing. For some reason, when I first started to work with a piping bag, I just would keep squeezing when I wanted the swirl to actually end. And you will notice that I do have that support showing in the middle. We're gonna cover that up. You also might wonder why I have a support in here at all. Reason being is it's a little bit of a taller cake, so just for extra safety, since this will be traveling, I just wanted to make the drive a little bit less stressful. Okay, now by the time I got to this recipe, I was feeling confident. So far, my recipes had worked out, and this one seemed like it was going to be absolutely delicious. It was even smelling good when I was actually making it. Now, this was supposed to be a sponge cake, but honestly, it turned into a giant disaster, and I'm really not sure why. At first, I thought, oh man, I just overfilled the pans completely. So then I just put it on a little baking tray and decided that I would bake it all the way through still. But I'm getting sunken in textures here. I really don't know what went wrong. If I can manage to salvage this cake for something, I will share it with you guys, but if not, enjoy this next recipe. And basically, I just took the cake tops from that other cake that we did, the Dulce de Leche cake, and now I'm going to create cake pops out of them. But of course, if you don't actually want to bake a cake and cut the tops off, then you can obviously make a half recipe and you can just use it for your cake pops. I used the leftover Dulce de Leche buttercream to just get everything formed together nicely, but you can use whatever you want. If you want to make this a true chocolate recipe, you can also add in chocolate ganache or chocolate buttercream. And the key to basically making cake pops is just to make sure that you've got the right texture. If it can't mold together into a ball with you pressing fairly firmly, then you need to add in more buttercream if it's too dry, or you need to add in more cake if it's too wet and pliable. Place those in the fridge for approximately 30 minutes, and I'm going to use a sunflower oil today, which is a flavorless oil. You just want to use some sort of flavorless oil in your chocolate so that you can't taste it, but it can make everything nice and smooth. Then I'm going to dip my cake pops in there. Now, some of you have talked about how your cake pop sticks have fallen out of your cake pops. And the way to prevent that is just to take your cake pop stick, dip it in the chocolate, and then insert it into the cake pop. And once you do that, make sure that it's solidified before you go ahead and dip in the chocolate. Now, when you're adding on sprinkles, you do want to make sure that you wait just a couple seconds. Wait till that chocolate sets up just a little bit, but not so that it's opaque, and then go ahead and apply your sprinkles on there. You'll also notice that I'm giving the cake pop a little shower sprinkle instead of dunking it in there. Reason being is if you do it that way, then you end up all the sprinkles just kind of mushed in there. And if you're not using chocolate sprinkles, it will be very obvious. I also want to maintain that rounded shape on the bottom, even though these are upside down cake pops. And there you have it. I did use up all of the egg yolks from that macaron day. I will say though, I'm a little bit sad about those wasted ones with that sponge cake, but I'm hoping to be able to fix that up just a little bit so that I can salvage those ingredients. You guys know how I feel about wasting. Now, in terms of taste, the pound cake was actually surprisingly light. I thought it would be a lot more dense, but it was really nice and light and had a great flavor. The cake was more dense, but again, really nice flavor to it as well. So with this pound cake, if you guys saw my Instagram story, what I actually did with this was I sliced it all up and I got it ready and saved for lunches for the week. Just a nice little pick-me-up. But for this particular slice, since I am not on the go, I'm going to put some whipped cream on here with some berries. So delightful. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys.